thank you so much for coming. I'm blown away and a bit humbled by the support and interest in this little book of tales about our beautiful island. I'm reading something because I'm not very good at ad-libbing, so forgive me. You being here today is heartwarming. I checked my email folder the other day, covering all things Ted Jones and this book. And in my first email on the subject was sent to Denise Foley-Burns, David Paxton and Andy Walters for Olive to read on the 19th of August 2023. So a couple of days later, I sent a second email, very similar, to Margaret Anderson and Professor John Pern. And it read, I'm thinking of writing a story about Ted Jones, the man, in the lead up to what brought him to Coochiemudlo and his interests, etc., which led to his passion project of proving Coochie was Matthew Flinders' sixth island. There appears to be a fair bit written about the successful outcome that led to Flinders Day, but not much on the person behind the story. So in this instant, as with other informants who followed, everybody replied positively, offering equal support in my quest. So reaching this stage has taken very close to 2 years. There are several people who need a big thank you, and firstly the Heritage Society for letting me use their facilities and their records downstairs over such an extended period of time to research Ted Jones and the Coochie community of decades past. Even yesterday at the market, John and the committee were very generous in sharing their space to promote and let me sell copies of the book. The Progress Association have also been terrific, promoting the event on their Facebook page, lending equipment for the launch, and Peter generously driving the bus on the Sunday to meet people coming on the ferry. And also thank you, Lance, for coming today, and our council rep, I really appreciate it. And there are Coochie locals, friends and family who have leapt in, offering to make sandwiches, help in the kitchen, bring flowers and all sorts, so that we can all enjoy a fun afternoon. Natel, Jackie, Sue and Bill, Jenny and Fran, Ray and Peter, Joe, Jan, John, Elizabeth, Chris and Jeremy and Peter, thank you. It takes a wide and varied team to see that such a happy event as today fulfil our expectations. And I would also like to acknowledge a few people who, due to other commitments, were unable to come today. John Pern, Paul Bland, Jan Otto and Yvonne Beckett, also known as Merle. And I also remember the late Norma Green. Norma would have enjoyed today. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to have interviewed her in May last year. I'm very appreciative also of Jenny Shue, who with her family suffered the recent loss of Norman. So Jenny was a terrific help. Must have gone back to her about 3 or 4 times. And Professor John Pern, a remarkable individual who wrote the foreword for the book. He's enjoyed a long-standing connection to Coochie. He was the key editor behind the Chronicles of Coochiemudlo and another book, both available through the Heritage Society and also online. And Paul Bland, Doug Moreton's grandson, is somewhere in the North Atlantic today, heading for Greenland, otherwise he would be here. For those who haven't heard of these names, you have an exciting journey ahead as you delve into Coochie history. It takes more than a long-term resident on a small island to be called a living treasure, which is how Ted Jones was remembered at his memorial service in 2012. And as a past committee member of the Heritage Society, I knew we held in safekeeping a crate of papers belonging to Ted, but to the best of my knowledge, no one had looked inside for a long time. And having watched many a Flinders Day reenactment over the years, I thought I knew Ted's story, his solving of a mystery about Matthew Flinders' chart of Moreton Bay. Periodically in the history room downstairs, we would move Ted's crate around from here to there, making room for more important items, until one day, curiosity got the better of me. And this book, it began as a straightforward story about an unusual character who, like many of us, made Coochiemudlo their home. But as I fell deeper into the rabbit hole of Ted's papers, it became evident that Coochiemudlo and those who lived on this island, particularly during the 1960s and 70s, had to be woven into the story. Ted's biography is the central thread throughout the book, made all the more fascinating, if not entertaining, by the colourful tapestry that made up island living at that time. Pressed against a brittle plastic lid of the crate was a grey vinyl briefcase, which has been brought upstairs today. It's on the table at the back, stuffed with layers of fragile and tattered newspaper clippings and wads of typed and handwritten pages, some even in Pitman's shorthand. They were held together by rusted paper clips and plastic ties, the type to tie off bags of fruit and bread. And as I opened the briefcase, I was engulfed in what seemed a film of dust and a musty odour, as if the contents had just heaved a long-awaited sigh of relief. I half expected a genie to appear, screaming at me, the stories, tell the stories. See, Ted had a thing. He used to write down a lot of his conversations with people. So, it's very interesting. Ted Jones solved what had been a maritime mystery for nearly 170 years. In 1799, Matthew Flinders anchored off a small island he named Sixth Island before being rowed ashore to take the noon sighting. And the landmarks that the 25-year-old naval lieutenant on the 19th of July of that year matched Coochiemudlo perfectly. Out of 6 islands in Moreton Bay that Flinders named by number, in the early 1960s, professional historians and institutions such as the Royal Historical Society of Queensland concluded that it had to be Macleay or possibly Carragara. But that was most likely, those 2 islands were most likely to be Flinders' 6th island. And they say history is written by the victors, and it takes a brave or mad individual who tries to rewrite it. And given Ted's cartography skills, being an aviation navigator during the Second World War, he went as far as taking latitudinal bearings down on Norfolk Beach, comparing his readings to Flinders' 1799 chart. Ted was astounded that after all this time, no one else could see the physical similarities to Coochie, or also look at the latitude. And so began a lifelong obsession, earning Ted Jones praise and derision in equal measure. I'd like to end this with an observation. The 3 people who are going to read or speak next about this endeavour are actually living libraries of Coochie's past. And there are more amongst us, here and at home, whose stories haven't been yet captured. It doesn't take a professional to record a conversation or capture their life story. So if you have someone in your family with a story to tell, even if it's got nothing to do with Coochie, grab your phone or a notebook and get their stories down. Knowing one's family history is a worthy legacy. And that's why I'm sort of, at the moment, sticking to life stories, and I've got a couple more coming up. Before I hand over to, I think it'll be Denise, will be the first person that will come up. If anyone wants to go on my mailing list, you can just write your name and email down on a notepad that's at the back of the hall. I only do about 3 or 4 a year, so you won't get inundated. But so thank you for your time. Well, I've got notes because I didn't think I
I do it very well, impromptu. Well, glasses, old people in glasses. Edward Field Jones, Ted, arrived at Coochiemudlo Island in the early 60s. Ted was not concerned that there was not any facilities such as electricity, running water, nor sewerage. He happily was contented with the kerosene refrigerator, kerosene lights, and a water tank. He lived a very simple life and was against the reticulation of electricity occurring when it was mooted. Soon after he settled onto the island, he became a member of the Moreton Progress Association, which Marie-Louise Potter's father and mother were involved in. Marie-Louise is over there. And it was mainly the older gentlemen on the island who were involved in it, and they were living around the island, but they had big acreages and so on. And because it was run from Bullen's Hall, it was run from Bullen's Hall, and all of the elderly gentlemen over there would run the Progress Association. That's what was called the Moreton Progress Association. Later, as development occurred and they broke the island up into the red soil end and the sandy end, they decided to start the new Progress Association, calling it the Coochiemudlo Island Progress Association. And Ted became involved in that too. When he was in the other Progress Association at Moreton, there was a meeting to do with getting the bridge to the island because they were wanting progress any way they could get it. And they took a vote on it. The Courier Mail was there. Ted had pneumonia and he was in a bad way, and he got hysterical because people were talking for the bridge and he was against it. Anyway, he got taken home because his temperature was high and he was really sick. But then he came up again and became involved with the Progress Association that used to meet downstairs in Elliott Hall. And he was really, at that stage, he was getting involved in his navigational skills, and he was really determined to find out the history of the island, and he decided that he would start haunting the libraries and the universities and everything. And then that was when he discovered that Flinders discovered the sixth island, and it was called Coochiemudlo in 2 words. And he decided at a progress meeting we should have an annual event celebrating this. So in the early days on the island, he began to learn more about the history, and he discovered that another navigator named Matthew Flinders discovered the island on the 19th of July, 1799. Progress Association voted to always have a reenactment of Flinders. It was Ted who nominated that we do that. I seconded it. That we get the noonday sighting of what was named Norfolk Beach on the anniversary of when he discovered the island. Ted was certain that the exact area where Matthew landed, using his navigational skills with his sextant as Matthew Flinders would have done. And so here's its history.
Congratulations, Christine. It only seems like yesterday that she was talking about doing the book, and then suddenly there it is. They said that Thomas Huxley was Darwin's bulldog, in which case Ted Jones, you would be his labradoodle, I think. This is a couple of pages out of Christine's book on the campaigns that Ted was involved with, and this one is on the bridge. After resigning as Secretary of the Progress Association, just as an aside, Ted told me he became Secretary in order to sabotage the association, which is this very strange worldview if you think about it. Anyway, then he resigned, having tried to sabotage it. He continued attending meetings, not hesitating to voice an opinion on pretty much everything. The minutes of the June 65 meeting describe a disturbance instigated by the former secretary. Ted, being Ted, made ruffling feathers an art form. The Mortons had pursued the idea of a bridge to connect Coochiemudlo Island to the mainland, prompting them to write to the member for Logan, the Honourable R.L. Harrison, MLA. As soon as Ted heard about it, he penned a letter to the Honourable Member stating his vehement opposition. Battle lines were drawn. Neighbours lined up on opposing sides. Some stopped talking, and gossip turned nasty. The bridge campaign was the most divisive issue the islanders had faced. On Friday, the 11th of June 1965, the Courier Mail published an article, "It's the Island of Hope," asserting that the Redland Shire Council supported residents in having a bridge linking Coochiemudlo to Victoria Point. Ted chased up the Progress President, Norm Pullen, and the Secretary, Claire Elliott. Both denied any involvement. "Sounds like Doug Moreton trying to sell his 9 acres of land," Norm responded. The Mortons got wind of what Ted was up to, prompting Mary to dial his number. "I just wanted you to know that the bridge is going to go ahead and there is nothing you or anyone else can do to stop it." Ted made a habit of journaling conversations with people, as Christine had said. His notes read, "It didn't take long for a flabbergasted and furious Mary Moreton to inform me that she had been the one responsible for the article." Ted phoned the Courier Mail's Chief of Staff, offering another side of the story. Later that month, and out of all of this came that famous cartoon of the bridge, looking like a bedstead really, wasn't it? And it probably will one day too. Ted phoned the Courier Mail Chief of Staff, offering another side of the story. Later that month, the Progress Association called a public meeting at Pullen's Hall, inviting the Courier Mail people to attend. Doug Moreton tabled a motion to explore all avenues, including getting the council's cooperation to construct a bridge between Victoria Point and Coochiemudlo. He laid out his case, and it resonates now. The whole island is residentially rated, although part is still rural. We pay the same rates as on the mainland, which has all amenities, and we have none. We are cut off in times of accidents and severe illnesses. Older residents, including me, have had to take dangerously ill people across to the mainland, sometimes in rough cyclonic weather. You need to experience these things to know how difficult it can be. If we had a bridge, more people would live here. There would be access to schools, electricity, phones, and cheaper costs of building. And then there was a voice from the back of the room. Could not the solution be a barge or a daily ferry? One man at the back of the room asked, keeping his head down to avoid being named in the minutes. There were about 30 vehicles on the island. Most had seen better days, many being unregistered and uninsured. Someone compared it to Bribey Island. More suggestions, both for and against, were offered. Ted was very unwell that day, as Denise said, and like a dog straining on a chain, he was almost apoplectic. So vehemently he opposed a bridge. Words were said, and in the blink of an eye, Ted launched himself at Gary Elliott. Chairs scraped across the floor as people drew back. Dogs started barking, and kids ran for the veranda, disappearing into the pitch dark, while mayhem in the big room unfolded, So much for welcome stranger above the mantelpiece. While the Folleys sat behind Ted, Dr. Jim Foley had been observing Ted's antics. The amiable doctor, known for his disarming nature, was alarmed. Ted was dripping with sweat, in June mind you, and his colour was shocking, both signs of a raging fever. Jim stood up and hauled Ted out of the meeting. The Assembly voted on Doug's motion. The count was 25-2, 25 for and 13 against, with 14 abstaining. Later, they discovered some people had hedged their bets, voting for and against. Even the children voted. That sounds very much like a Coochie plebiscite, doesn't it? But the nays carried. On the following Monday, the Courier Mail published, "Shh, please go quietly at Coochie." So that's a little sample of Christine's writing.
Thank you. Thank you.
On Sunday morning, 18th July 1999, the Norfolk maintained a southerly course for Coochiemudlo Island, anchoring off Norfolk Beach. Thanks to Ted Jones's tireless research and obsession, the next 24 hours would be etched into the island community's psyche for decades to come. At 7 a.m. that Sunday, the Norfolk sailed out of Manly Boat Harbour towards Moreton. The boat wasn't scheduled to pick up Ted until 10:30. Ted suggested Norfolk anchor off Peel Island until it was ready to come in close to this island. A flotilla of small boats met up with the Norfolk near Peel and escorted her towards Norfolk Beach, where she was to drop anchor. Looking very smart in a new costume organised by Margaret Anderson, Ted waited anxiously. His finest hour was about to unfold. In the lead-up, Ted was made to dress and undress. He was measured, poked, prodded. Everything about Matthew Flinders' uniform had to be perfect. On the morning of the big day, they bustled Ted, disguised under a large overcoat, into a small boat out to the Norfolk, where it anchored northeast of Moreton. Feeling the strain of the cloak and dagger, Ted could only sigh with relief once he was safely on board. The Norfolk proceeded to the arranged anchorage point of Norfolk Beach, timing its arrival by 11:20 a.m. The day before, Progress Association volunteers erected an enormous marquee on Main Beach. They set up the band and dancing area at one end and arranged tables and chairs cafe style at the other. Bruce Green's son slept in the marquee for security. By 8 a.m, 50 food and craft stalls were open. As the boats pulled up at the island jetty, St Rita's Primary School band greeted the visitors, breaking out in a crescendo of brass, flutes and drums, sending Coochie's flock of parrots shooting out of the nearby trees. Anne Wright was the official photographer, while Margaret Anderson, with walkie-talkies strapped to her belt, was hard to catch all day. Norma reckoned Margaret was moving so fast her feet wasn't touching the ground. Two crises were happening simultaneously, and the day was still young. First, no one could find the state member for Redlands, John Hegarty, MOA, and the proceedings could hardly start without him. The late Dawn Peterson was a great supporter of Flinders Day, and every year she dressed up as Captain Pugwash, delighting visitors and children alike with her antics. On this day, dressed in her usual gear, Dawn was to pick John Hegarty up in her jag and bring him around to Norfolk Beach. But the clock was ticking. Where was Dawn? Margaret took off in her car to look for her where she spotted the jag. Dawn collected John Hecate and took him back to her place for a quick drink. Noticing the time, she took a shortcut through the wetlands, but they didn't get far before getting well and truly bogged. Margaret was in two-way communication with the police, fisheries, the Coast Guard and the Norfolk when it came time to coordinate Ted's appearance. And for the rest of that exciting episode, you're going to have to buy the book.